The desert sun blazed mercilessly overhead as Samuel "Sam" Crawford guided his weathered horse through the rocky terrain of the Arizona Territory. His canteen held barely 2 swallows of warm water, and his lips were cracked from 3 days of relentless travel. The year was 1882, and Sam had been wandering the Southwest for months, searching for something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps redemption, perhaps just a place where his past wouldn't follow him. Sam was a former cavalry scout turned drifter, a man who had seen too much blood and broken too many promises to sleep peacefully in civilized towns. His dark hair hung long beneath his worn hat, and his steel-gray eyes held the weariness of someone who had witnessed the worst of frontier justice. The Colt .45 on his hip wasn't for show. It had saved his life more times than he cared to count. As he crested a small ridge, Sam heard something that made him pull his horse to an abrupt halt. Voices carried on the desert wind, angry and threatening. He dismounted quietly, leaving his horse behind a cluster of barrel cacti, and crept forward to investigate. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 Apache women, barely more than girls, knelt in the dirt with their hands bound behind their backs. Rough hemp nooses hung from a makeshift gallows constructed from 2 mesquite trees. 5 white men in dusty clothes stood around them, their faces twisted with hatred and excitement. The leader, a fat man with a sheriff's badge gleaming on his vest, was reading from a crumpled piece of paper. "By the authority vested in me by the territorial government," Sheriff Morton bellowed, "these Apache savages are hereby sentenced to death for the murder of innocent settlers." His voice carried the false righteousness of a man who enjoyed his power too much. Sam's jaw tightened as he studied the scene. The women showed no fear, their dark eyes defiant even in the face of death. The youngest couldn't have been more than 16, with braided black hair and traditional Apache dress. The eldest, perhaps 25, held herself with the dignity of someone who refused to give her captors the satisfaction of seeing her break. The other men were clearly not lawmen. Their clothes were too fine for deputies, and they carried themselves with the arrogance of wealthy men who believed money could buy them anything, including the right to take lives. One wore an expensive suit despite the desert heat, his pale skin already burning red in the sun. Another sported a gold watch chain and boots that cost more than most people earned in a year. "String 'em up, boys," Morton commanded, spitting tobacco juice into the sand. "The town'll sleep easier knowing these murderers are feeding the buzzards." Sam had seen enough frontier justice to recognize a lynching when he saw one. These women weren't getting a fair trial. They were victims of prejudice and bloodlust. His hand moved instinctively to his gun, but he forced himself to think strategically. 5 against 1 weren't good odds, especially when the men held hostages. He circled around the camp, using the natural cover of rocks and desert brush to get closer. Sam had learned stealth from Apache scouts during his cavalry days, and the irony wasn't lost on him that those same skills might now save Apache lives. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, casting longer shadows that would aid his approach. As he moved, Sam noticed something odd about the scene. The women's clothes were clean, without the dust and wear he'd expect from fugitives who'd been running through the desert. Their hands showed no signs of recent violence, no cuts, bruises, or dirt under their fingernails that would suggest a struggle with victims. Most telling of all, they carried themselves with the calm dignity of the innocent, not the desperate defiance of cornered killers. The fat sheriff continued his performance, clearly enjoying his moment of authority. "These heathens killed the Jameson family in cold blood," he announced to his audience. "Burned their cabin, stole their livestock, and left their bodies for the coyotes. The territorial government wants these murderers brought to justice, and by God, that's what they'll get." But something in Morton's voice rang false to Sam's trained ear. The sheriff was reciting his accusations like lines in a play, without the genuine anger or grief Sam would expect from a lawman dealing with such brutal crimes. The other men nodded along, but their attention seemed focused more on the spectacle than on justice for supposed victims. Sam crept close enough to hear one of the well-dressed men whisper to another, "Once this is done, the whole valley will be ours. No more Apache claims to worry about." The pieces began falling into place in Sam's mind. This wasn't about justice for murdered settlers, this was about land. These women weren't killers. They were obstacles to someone's plans for expansion and profit. The territorial government had likely never authorized this execution, and Sam doubted the Jameson family even existed. The youngest Apache woman suddenly lifted her head, her eyes scanning the rocks where Sam was hidden. For a moment, their gazes met across the desert terrain. She gave the slightest nod as if acknowledging his presence, then returned to her stoic pose. Sam realized she had spotted him despite his careful approach, but chose not to alert their captors. The trust implicit in that moment strengthened his resolve. "Time's wasting," Morton growled, pulling the first noose tight. "Let's get this done before dark. I don't want to be riding back to town in the dark with Apache ghosts following us." Sam checked his ammunition and prepared to act. He had 6 shots in his Colt, plus the rifle on his horse if he could reach it. The men were spread out enough that he couldn't take them all with a single ambush, but he might be able to create enough chaos to give the women a chance to escape. As the sun continued its relentless descent toward the western peaks, Sam Crawford prepared to risk everything for 3 strangers whose only crime was being born Apache, in a territory where hatred and greed masqueraded as justice. He didn't know their names or their stories, but he recognized innocence when he saw it, and he'd be damned if he'd stand by and watch it hang from a desert tree. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of evening coolness, but Sam felt only the heat of righteous anger building in his chest. Sam waited until Morton stepped forward to place the first noose around the eldest woman's neck. The sheriff's back was turned and the other men were focused on the grim spectacle, their guard down in their confidence that no one would dare interfere with their mock trial. This was Sam's moment. He drew his Colt in one smooth motion and fired. The bullet took Morton in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the makeshift gallows. The crude structure swayed but held as Morton's scream of pain and surprise shattered the desert silence. "What the hell?" shouted one of the well-dressed men, fumbling for his gun. Sam was already moving, using the rocks as cover while he fired his second shot. The bullet caught the man in the leg, dropping him to his knees in the sand. The remaining 3 men scrambled for their weapons, but Sam's years of frontier experience gave him precious seconds of advantage. He put a 3rd bullet into the ground near the feet of a man reaching for a rifle, sending him diving for cover behind a pile of supplies. "Let the women go," Sam's voice echoed off the canyon walls, amplified by the natural acoustics of the desert. "This is your only warning." Morton clutched his bleeding shoulder, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You damned fool. Do you know who you're shooting at? I'm the sheriff of Copper Creek, and these men represent the Territorial Land Company." "I know exactly who you are," Sam called back, keeping his position behind a boulder. "I also know those women aren't guilty of anything except being inconvenient to your plans." The youngest Apache woman had already begun working at her bonds, her nimble fingers finding the knots even with her hands tied behind her back. The other 2 women remained still, but Sam could see their eyes tracking the positions of their captors, ready to move when the opportunity presented itself. One of the men, the one with the gold watch chain, tried to flank Sam's position. He moved quietly around a cluster of prickly pear cacti, his expensive pistol drawn and ready. But Sam had learned patience in the cavalry, and he waited until the man was fully exposed before putting his 4th bullet center mass into the man's chest. The would-be flanker dropped without a sound. The sight of their companion's death sent the remaining men into a panic. Morton was still bleeding and cursing, while the man Sam had shot in the leg was trying to crawl away through the thorny desert brush. Only one able-bodied gunman remained, crouched behind the supply pile with a rifle. "This ain't over, stranger," Morton yelled, his voice cracking with pain and fury. "The Territorial Land Company has powerful friends. You just signed your death warrant." Sam ignored the threat and focused on the rifleman. The man had found decent cover and was trying to draw a bead on Sam's position. Sam had 2 bullets left in his Colt, and his horse, with his rifle, was a dangerous sprint away across open ground. The youngest Apache woman suddenly stood up, her hands free. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a fist-sized rock and hurled it with deadly accuracy at the rifleman's head. The stone connected with a solid thunk, and the man toppled backward, his rifle discharging harmlessly into the air. "Much obliged." "Miss," Sam called out, emerging from his cover with his gun still drawn. The remaining men were either wounded, unconscious, or fleeing into the desert. Sam quickly cut the bonds of the other 2 women while keeping watch for any sign of renewed attack. The eldest woman rubbed her wrists where the rope had chafed, then spoke in accented but clear English. "You are very foolish, white man," she said, but her tone held gratitude rather than criticism. "These men will not forget this day." "Neither will I," Sam replied, helping her to her feet. "My name's Sam Crawford. I couldn't stand by and watch innocent people hang. The woman studied his face with intelligent dark eyes. I am Ayana. This is my sister Kaya, she indicated the youngest woman. And this is Ciala, wife of our chief's son. We are not murderers, as you have guessed. Morton was struggling to his feet, still clutching his shoulder. You've made a terrible mistake, Crawford. These savages killed a whole family. The territorial government wants them brought to justice. What family? Sam demanded, his gun trained on the corrupt sheriff. Give me names, dates, locations. If you're telling the truth, you should have all the details. Morton's face went pale beneath the desert tan. He stammered for a moment before falling back on bluster. That's official business. I don't have to explain myself to some drifter. Ayana stepped forward, her posture radiating quiet dignity. There was no family, she said simply. These men came to our village under a flag of truce. They said the territorial government wanted to discuss a treaty for the land where we winter. Instead, they took us at gunpoint while our men were hunting. Sam nodded grimly. The story made sense, much more sense than Morton's wild accusations. Who's behind this? Who benefits if your people lose that land? The same men who hired this false sheriff. Ciala spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. Men who want our sacred places for their cattle and their mines. The wounded man with the gold watch chain was trying to crawl toward his horse, leaving a trail of blood in the sand. Sam recognized him now. He'd seen that face on wanted posters in town saloons. This was Edward Blackwood, a notorious land grabber who used violence and corruption to force out anyone who stood in the way of his schemes. Blackwood, Sam said, walking over to the dying man. I should have known you'd be behind something like this. Blackwood looked up with hatred-filled eyes. You don't know what you're interfering with, he gasped. This territory belongs to progress, not to savages. This territory belongs to whoever has the strength to hold it, Sam replied coldly. And today, that's not you. As the sun touched the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Sam helped the 3 Apache women gather what supplies they could from their captors. Morton had fled into the desert on foot, leaving a trail of blood that the coyotes would follow. The other survivors had scattered, carrying word of the day's events back to their masters. Ayana approached Sam as he watered his horse from a captured canteen. You have made powerful enemies today, Sam Crawford. Why did you risk so much for strangers? Sam considered the question as he watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky. I've seen too many innocent people die while bad men prospered, he said finally. Maybe I can't change the whole territory, but I could do something about today. Kaya, the youngest, had been quiet since the rescue, but now she spoke urgently to her sister in Apache. Ayana's expression grew troubled as she listened. What is it? Sam asked. Kaya overheard the men talking before you arrived, Ayana explained. This was not just about our winter camp. They plan to use our supposed deaths to justify attacking our main village. They want to eliminate our entire band and claim all our traditional lands. Sam felt ice form in his stomach despite the desert heat. When? Tomorrow, when the hunting party returns and finds us missing. The men will track our trail here and find evidence of a massacre. That will give Blackwood's people the excuse they need for what they call righteous vengeance. The magnitude of the conspiracy was becoming clear. This hadn't been a simple lynching. It was the opening move in a campaign of genocide disguised as frontier justice. Sam realized that rescuing 3 women was only the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous fight. Sam knew they couldn't stay at the lynching site any longer than necessary. Morton might return with reinforcements, or other members of Blackwood's organization could arrive to investigate when their men failed to report back. As darkness fell across the desert, he helped the 3 Apache women mount the horses left behind by their captors. We need to reach your village before the hunting party returns, Sam said, checking his rifle and ammunition. How far? Ayana pointed northeast toward a range of mesas barely visible in the starlight. 2 days hard riding through the desert, but there are shorter paths through the mountains that only we know. If we travel by night and rest during the heat of the day, we can arrive by tomorrow evening. Sam nodded. Night travel in the desert was dangerous, easy to get lost, easier to ride into trouble, but it was their best chance of staying ahead of whoever would come looking for Blackwood and his men. They rode in single file, with Kaya leading because she knew the terrain best despite her youth. The girl had an uncanny ability to find paths through the rocky wilderness that seemed impossible in daylight. Sam brought up the rear, constantly watching their back trail for signs of pursuit. As they navigated a narrow canyon between towering rock walls, Shala spoke quietly to Sam. "You fight like a soldier, but you dress like a wanderer. What is your story, Sam Crawford?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, listening to the soft clip-clop of hooves on stone. "I was a cavalry scout for 10 years, he said finally. Served under Colonel Davidson in the Apache Wars. Saw too much killing on both sides, too many good people dying for bad reasons. When my enlistment ended, I couldn't bring myself to re-up." "The Apache Wars," Ayanna repeated thoughtfully. "You fought against our people." "I did," Sam admitted, feeling no need to soften the truth. "But I also learned to respect them. Some of the bravest, most honorable men I ever met wore Apache war paint. It took me too long to realize that most of the savage raids we were sent to punish were really desperate attempts by hungry people to protect their families." Kaya called back softly in Apache, and the group halted. She had spotted something ahead that concerned her. Sam dismounted and crept forward to investigate, his hand on his gun. In the distance, he could see the faint glow of a campfire tucked into an alcove in the canyon wall. "Travelers," Kaya whispered when Sam returned. "But I cannot tell if they are friends or enemies in this darkness." Sam studied the situation. They could try to go around, but that would add hours to their journey, time they couldn't afford. On the other hand, riding into an unknown camp could be walking into a trap. "Can you get us past them without being seen?" he asked. Kaya smiled, and even in the starlight Sam could see the confidence in her expression. "Follow me. Stay in single file and do exactly as I do." What followed was the most nerve-wracking hour of Sam's life. Kaya led them along a ledge barely wide enough for the horses, hugging the canyon wall in absolute silence. The path required them to pass within 50 yards of the campfire, close enough that Sam could hear the men's conversation. "Should have been back by now," one voice was saying. "Morton promised they'd be done with those Apache bitches by sunset." "Maybe they decided to have some fun with them first," another voice replied with a cruel laugh. "Can't say I'd blame them. Been a long time since any of us had a taste of exotic flesh." Sam's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to remain silent and keep moving. There were at least 4 men around that fire, all armed, and getting into a gunfight in the narrow canyon would doom any chance of reaching the Apache village in time. Ayanna, riding directly in front of him, turned slightly and caught his eye. She had heard the conversation too, and the look she gave him was filled with understanding and gratitude. She knew how difficult it was for him to ride past men who spoke of her people with such contempt. They made it past the camp without detection, and an hour later emerged onto a high plateau where they could make better time. The desert stretched out below them in all directions, a vast landscape of silver sand and black shadows under the star-filled sky. "Those men at the camp," Sam said during a brief rest to water the horses. "They were part of the conspiracy." "Blackwood's hired guns," Ciala confirmed. "They have been in the territory for 2 months preparing for this. They call themselves deputies, but they take orders from the land company, not from any legitimate law." Sam was beginning to understand the scope of the plot against the Apache. This wasn't a spontaneous outbreak of frontier violence. It was a carefully planned campaign to eliminate the tribe and seize their lands. Blackwood had hired an army of gunfighters and corrupt officials to give his land grab the appearance of legality. As dawn approached, they took shelter in a hidden cave that Kaya remembered from childhood. The opening was concealed behind a curtain of desert willows, and inside the cave was cool and spacious enough for both horses and riders. While the women rested, Sam kept watch at the cave entrance. In the growing daylight, he could see riders in the distance, 5 or 6 men spread out in a search pattern, clearly looking for their trail. The hiding place was well chosen. From the desert floor, the cave was invisible. Ayanna joined him at the entrance, moving with the silent grace that seemed natural to her people. "You are troubled," she observed. "I'm trying to figure out how deep this conspiracy goes," Sam replied, keeping his voice low. "Blackwood has money and men, but that's not enough for what he's planning. He needs official sanction from the territorial government." "You think there are others involved? Men with real authority?" Sam nodded grimly. "Land grabs this big require legal cover. Blackwood needs judges, territorial officials, maybe even federal authorities to look the other way, or actively participate. Otherwise, he'd never be able to claim clear title to Apache lands. The implications were disturbing. If Sam was right, The conspiracy reached into the highest levels of territorial government. Exposing the plot would require more than just saving one Apache village. It would mean taking on a network of corruption that stretched from the local courthouse to the territorial capital. There is something else, Ayanna said quietly. Something I have not told you because I was not sure I could trust you. Sam turned to look at her, noting the serious expression on her face. What is it? Our winter camp is not just any land. It sits above rich silver deposits that Blackwood's company wants to mine. But there is more. It is also the route of a proposed railroad that would connect the copper mines to the territorial capital. The pieces clicked into place in Sam's mind. Silver mines, railroad routes, territorial expansion. These were the kind of high-stakes projects that could make men wealthy beyond imagination. They were also the kind of projects that led to wars when indigenous peoples stood in the way of progress. How do you know about the railroad? Sam asked. Because some of our young men work as scouts for the survey teams, Ayanna explained. They bring back information about the white man's plans. We have known for months that trouble was coming, but we hoped that negotiations might prevent bloodshed. Instead, Blackwood decided to eliminate the negotiation process entirely, Sam said. Frame your people for murder. Wipe out your village in self-defense and claim the land as abandoned territory. A sound from deeper in the cave interrupted their conversation. Kaya was calling softly in Apache and her tone carried urgency. Sam and Ayanna hurried back to find the young woman standing at what appeared to be a blank rock wall. What is it? Ayanna asked in English, for Sam's benefit. Hidden passage, Kaya replied, pressing her hands against seemingly solid stone. A section of the wall pivoted inward, revealing a narrow tunnel. Goes under the mountain. We can reach the village by noon instead of tonight. Sam stared at the secret passage in amazement. How did you know about this? Kaya smiled shyly. My grandfather was one of the last traditional pathfinders. He taught me the old ways, the secret ways that our enemies do not know. The hidden tunnel represented more than just a shortcut. It was a lifeline that might allow them to reach the village before Blackwood's men could spring their trap. But it also meant traveling through unknown underground passages where they could easily become lost or trapped. The underground passage was like stepping into another world. Ancient Apache hands had carved and widened natural caves over generations, creating a hidden highway through the mountain's heart. The walls bore faded paintings, symbols, and scenes that told stories of hunts, battles, and ceremonies from long ago. Kaya led the way with a torch made from dried grass and pine pitch, the flickering light casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. The horses were nervous in the confined space, but they followed the familiar scent and voice of their riders through the winding tunnels. These passages were made during the time of my great-grandfather's grandfather, Ayanna explained to Sam as they rode single file through a corridor barely wide enough for mounted riders. When the first Spanish came to our lands, our people needed ways to move unseen between the valleys. Sam marveled at the engineering. The tunnels sloped downward at precise angles to prevent flooding, and side chambers provided rest areas and storage spaces. Air shafts hidden among the rocks above allowed fresh air to circulate, making the underground journey bearable. After an hour of steady progress, they emerged into a vast underground chamber lit by shafts of sunlight streaming through openings far overhead. An underground stream provided fresh water, and ancient petroglyphs covered every available wall surface. Sacred place, Ciala said reverently, dismounting to kneel beside the stream. Here our ancestors spoke with spirits and received visions of the future. Sam felt the weight of history in this hidden sanctuary. How many Apache leaders had come here over the centuries, seeking guidance in times of crisis? How many had received visions that helped their people survive against impossible odds? Kaya suddenly stiffened, holding up a hand for silence. She cocked her head, listening intently to sounds that escaped Sam's hearing. After a moment, she spoke urgently to Ayanna in rapid Apache. What is it? Sam asked, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. Men above, Ayanna translated. Many riders moving across the mountain. They have found our trail from yesterday, Sam cursed silently. Blackwood's search parties were more persistent than he'd hoped. How long before they find the cave entrance? They will not find the entrance, Kaya said confidently. But they may find where we entered the mountains. If they are smart, they will post guards at all the passes to wait for us to emerge. The implications were clear. They might reach the Apache village safely through the underground route, But they could find themselves trapped there if Blackwood's men controlled all the mountain passes. There is another problem, Ciala added quietly. If these men are watching the mountains, they will see our hunting party when it returns. Our warriors will be caught in the open, expecting to find their families safe in the village. Sam realized the trap was even more clever than he'd initially thought. Blackwood didn't just want to eliminate the Apache village. He wanted to destroy the entire fighting force of the band by catching them unprepared and outnumbered in open country. How many warriors are in the hunting party? Sam asked. 12, Ayana replied. Good fighters, but not enough against the army that Blackwood has gathered. As they continued through the underground passages, Sam found himself thinking about the broader implications of what they faced. This wasn't just about one Apache band or one corrupt land grab. If Blackwood succeeded here, he would have proved that indigenous peoples could be eliminated with impunity, using legal cover and government corruption to avoid consequences. The technique could be repeated across the entire territory. Frame tribes for crimes, massacre them in self-defense, and seize their lands for mining and railroad development. It was genocide disguised as progress, and Sam was perhaps the only person in position to expose it. They passed through another series of chambers, each with its own character and purpose. One contained cached weapons and supplies, hidden from Spanish conquistadors and Mexican authorities over the decades. Another held ceremonial items, drums, masks, and sacred objects that represented the spiritual heart of Apache culture. Your people have been preparing for this fight for a long time, Sam observed. Not this fight specifically, Ayana corrected. But we have always known that someday we might have to choose between our homeland and our lives. Our ancestors prepared these places so we could make that choice with honor. Sam understood. The tunnels and caches weren't just hiding places. They were part of a resistance network that had allowed the Apache to survive centuries of attempted conquest. Now that network was being tested against a new kind of enemy, one that used law and economics instead of just military force. They reached another junction, where 3 passages diverged. Kaya studied markings on the walls, consulting mental maps passed down through generations of her family. After a moment, she chose the middle path, but her confidence seemed shaken. Problem? Sam asked. These markings, they have been changed, Kaya said, pointing to symbols that had been scratched out and recarved. Someone has been here recently, someone who knows our ways. The revelation sent a chill through the group. If outsiders had discovered and mapped the secret passages, the Apache's greatest defensive advantage had been compromised. Worse, it suggested that the conspiracy against them included someone with intimate knowledge of tribal secrets. Who could have done this? Sam asked. Only someone raised among our people, Ciala said grimly. Someone who learned our secrets before choosing to betray us. The implications were devastating. The Apache had a traitor in their midst, someone who had provided Blackwood with detailed intelligence about tribal movements, defensive positions, and now even the location of their secret passages. As they continued deeper into the mountain, Sam found evidence that confirmed their worst fears. Fresh horse droppings in a side chamber showed that mounted men had used the passages recently. Boot prints in sandy sections were too regular and worn to belong to Apache moccasins. Blackwood's men have been using your own tunnels to spy on your village, Sam realized. They probably know exactly when the hunting party left, which routes they took, and when they're expected to return. The trap was more sophisticated than anything Sam had encountered during his military service. Blackwood had spent months preparing, gathering intelligence, and positioning his pieces. The attempted lynching of the 3 women was just one part of a larger strategy designed to eliminate the entire Apache band with maximum efficiency and minimum legal risk. But understanding, the trap also revealed its weaknesses. If Blackwood's plan depended on timing and surprise, disrupting either element could cause the whole scheme to collapse. The question was whether they could reach the village in time to organize an effective defense. How much farther? Sam asked as they navigated another winding passage. 1 hour, maybe less, Kaya replied. But Sam Crawford, you must understand. When we emerge from these tunnels, you will be in the heart of Apache territory. Some of our warriors may not listen to explanations before they act. Sam nodded grimly. He had risked his life to save 3 Apache women, but now he would have to trust those same people not to kill him on sight. It was a leap of faith that would test everything he believed about honor and justice on both sides of the frontier conflict. The sound of flowing water grew stronger ahead, and Sam could smell pine trees and mountain air. They were approaching the exit, and with it, the next phase of what was shaping up to be the most important fight of Sam Crawford's life. They emerged from the underground passage behind a waterfall that concealed the cave mouth perfectly. The Apache village lay spread before them in a hidden valley surrounded by towering cliffs, a natural fortress that had protected the band for generations. Traditional wickiups dotted the valley floor, and smoke from cooking fires rose peacefully into the clear mountain air. Sam's arrival caused immediate alarm. Apache warriors appeared from concealed positions with weapons ready, their painted faces grim and suspicious. For a tense moment, Sam thought his journey might end with Apache bullets instead of Blackwoods, but Ayanna quickly spoke in their language, explaining the situation. An elderly man emerged from the largest wickiup, his presence commanding immediate respect from the gathered warriors. His hair was gray with age, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. Sam could see the family resemblance to Ciala in his strong features and dignified bearing. "This is Chief Nalnish," Ayanna said, "Ciala's father-in-law and leader of our band." Chief Nalnish studied Sam carefully before speaking in accented but precise English. "Ayanna tells me you risked your life to save our women from a false hanging. Why would a white soldier do such a thing?" "Because it was right," Sam replied simply. "And because I've learned that a man's worth isn't determined by the color of his skin, or the language he speaks." The chief nodded slowly, then gestured for everyone to gather around a central fire. As the women told their story, Sam noticed the careful way the Apache positioned themselves, always with escape routes available, always with weapons within reach. These were people who had learned to survive by being ready for anything. "Tell me about this conspiracy," Chief Nalnish said when the women finished their account. Sam laid out everything he had observed and deduced: the fake charges against the women, Blackwood's land grab scheme, the involvement of territorial officials, and the timing of the trap being set for the returning hunting party. "You speak of corruption in the territorial government," the chief said thoughtfully, "but you are asking us to trust that not all white men are our enemies. Why should we believe this when our experience suggests otherwise?" It was a fair question, and Sam didn't try to sugarcoat his answer. "Because if we don't work together, Blackwood wins by default. He's counting on mistrust between our peoples to prevent any effective resistance to his plans." Chief Nalnish was quiet for a long moment, studying Sam's face as if trying to read his soul. Finally he spoke. "My son and the other hunters are expected to return before sunset. If what you say is true, they will ride into an ambush. We need to get word to them," Sam said. "Warn them about the trap and coordinate our defense. And how do you propose we do that?" "Blackwood's men control the mountain passes, and we cannot send signals without alerting them to our knowledge of their plans." Sam had been thinking about this problem during their underground journey. "The passages you used to bring me here, do they connect to other exits? Places where we could emerge behind Blackwood's lines?" Kaya looked to her chief, who nodded permission for her to speak. "Yes, but the other exits lead into dangerous country. One emerges near the old Spanish mine where men have been killed by bad air. Another opens onto a cliff face that requires ropes to climb. But both could get a small group past Blackwood's watchers. If they were willing to risk their lives, yes." Sam stood up, his mind made up. "I'll take the cliff route. If I can reach the hunting party before they enter the trap, we can turn this around on Blackwood." "You would do this?" Chief Nalnish asked. "Risk your life again for people you barely know?" "Someone has to," Sam replied. "Besides, I've got a personal score to settle with Blackwood now. He made this personal when he tried to murder innocent women." The chief studied him for another long moment, then nodded. "Kaya will guide you to the cliff passage. But understand, if you are captured, we cannot help you. And if you betray us, there is no place on this earth where you can hide from Apache justice." "Understood," Sam said. "But there's something else you need to know. Someone in your band has been feeding information to Blackwood. The secret passages have been mapped by outsiders." The revelation hit the gathered Apache like a physical blow. Warriors looked at each other with suspicion, and the atmosphere grew tense with mistrust. "You are certain of this?" Chief Nalnish asked, his voice deadly quiet. "The markings in the tunnels have been changed, and there's evidence that mounted men have used the passages recently. Whoever your traitor is, he's given Blackwood detailed intelligence about your defenses and movements." Chief Nalnish's face hardened. If this is true, the traitor will be found and dealt with according to our laws. But first, we must save our hunting party and defend our village. Sam spent the next hour preparing for what might be a suicide mission. The Apache women provided him with additional ammunition and supplies, while Kaya drew detailed maps in the dirt to show him the route to intercept the hunting party. The cliff passage is treacherous, she warned. Even our young men sometimes fall to their deaths. But if you can reach the bottom safely, you will be able to approach the hunting party from the east, where Blackwood's men will not expect anyone. And if I don't make it, then our warriors will return as planned, and we will make our stand here in the village. We have survived wars before. Sam understood that he was being given a chance to prove himself, but not being relied upon. The Apache would fight with or without his help, and they had contingency plans that didn't depend on his success. As he prepared to enter the cliff passage, Ayanna approached him. "There is something I must tell you," she said quietly. "Something about why we were really taken by Morton and Blackwood." Sam paused in checking his rifle. "What do you mean?" "We were not chosen randomly. Shala is the chief's daughter-in-law. I am the daughter of our medicine man, and Kaya is the granddaughter of our war leader. If we had died as planned, it would have broken the heart of our people's leadership." The psychological dimension of Blackwood's plan became clear. The lynching wasn't just meant to provide an excuse for attacking the village. It was designed to demoralize the Apache leadership by killing the women they loved most. "Blackwood really did his homework," Sam said grimly. "Yes, which means his traitor is someone with intimate knowledge of our family relationships and tribal politics, someone very close to the center of power in our band." Sam nodded, filing away that information for later consideration. Right now, his focus had to be on reaching the hunting party before they walked into Blackwood's trap. The cliff passage entrance was hidden behind a screen of mountain laurel, accessible only by crawling through a narrow opening barely wide enough for Sam's shoulders. Once inside, the passage descended steeply through natural rock formations that required careful climbing. Kaya had provided him with braided leather ropes and iron spikes forged from old horseshoes, tools that represented generations of Apache ingenuity in mountain warfare. The knowledge that he was following paths used by warriors for centuries gave Sam confidence as he began his dangerous descent. The cliff face was treacherous, with loose rock and limited handholds, but Sam's cavalry training had included mountain operations. He worked his way down methodically, testing each hold before trusting his weight to it. Halfway down, he heard voices echoing from the valley below. Blackwood's men were in position, waiting for the hunting party to return. Sam was running out of time. Sam reached the bottom of the cliff just as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. His hands were scraped and bleeding from the rope work, but he had made it down without alerting Blackwood's sentries. Through the pine trees, he could see at least a dozen armed men positioned along the trail that the Apache hunting party would use to return home. The trap was expertly laid. Blackwood's men had concealed themselves behind rocks and trees on both sides of a narrow canyon, creating a killing field with no escape routes. When the Apache warriors rode into the canyon, they would be cut down in a devastating crossfire before they could even draw their weapons. Sam worked his way carefully around the ambush positions, using skills learned from Apache scouts during his cavalry days. The irony wasn't lost on him. Techniques taught to him by Apache teachers were now being used to save Apache lives from white treachery. From a concealed position on a ridge overlooking the trail, Sam spotted the hunting party in the distance. 12 Apache warriors rode single file along a deer path, their horses laden with fresh meat from a successful hunt. They showed no signs of suspicion, expecting to find their families safe and their village peaceful. Sam had to warn them without alerting Blackwood's ambush party. He studied the terrain, looking for a way to intercept the hunters before they entered the kill zone. A dry creek bed ran roughly parallel to the main trail, offering concealed approach if Sam could reach it without being spotted. Moving like a ghost through the underbrush, Sam made his way toward the creek bed. But as he prepared to cross a small clearing, he heard a familiar voice that made his blood run cold. "He should have been here by now," Sheriff Morton was saying, his arm in a makeshift sling from the bullet wound Sam had given him. "Crawford and those Apache bitches disappeared into thin air. Maybe they went back to the village," another voice suggested. Sam recognized it as belonging to one of the men who had escaped from the lynching site. "Then we stick to the plan," Morton replied. When the hunting party shows up, we kill them all and claim they attacked us. Then we ride to the village and finish the job. Sam realized that Morton's survival had complicated the situation. The corrupt sheriff could provide testimony that would legitimize whatever massacre Blackwood had planned, giving it the appearance of lawful self-defense. Time was running short. The hunting party was less than a mile from the ambush site, and Sam still needed to reach them without triggering the trap prematurely. He abandoned stealth in favor of speed, knowing that his only chance was to outrun discovery. Sam burst from the tree line just as the lead Apache scout crested a small hill. The warrior's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon until Sam raised his hands and called out in the few Apache words Kaya had taught him. Friends. Danger, ambush! The lead warrior, a man about Sam's age with intricate facial tattoos, held up his hand to halt the hunting party. He studied Sam with intelligent eyes, clearly weighing whether this white stranger represented salvation or a different kind of trap. You speak Apache poorly, the warrior said in accented English, but I know your face. You are the cavalry scout called Ghostwalker. Sam was stunned. His Apache nickname from his military days was something he hadn't heard in years. You know me. I fought against you at Skeleton Canyon 3 summers ago. You saved 2 of my wounded brothers when you could have left them to die. I am Goyakla, war leader of this hunting band. The recognition was mutual now. Sam remembered Goyakla as a formidable opponent who had led several successful raids against cavalry patrols. That they had met as enemies made this moment even more significant. There's no time for war stories, Sam said urgently. Blackwood has men waiting in ambush a quarter-mile ahead. At least 12 gunmen positioned for a crossfire. Your village is safe, but if you ride into that canyon, you'll all die. Goyakla's expression grew grim as Sam quickly explained the conspiracy. The fake charges against the women, the planned massacre of the village, and the involvement of territorial officials. Why should we trust you? One of the other warriors asked suspiciously. This could be a white man's trick to lead us into an even worse trap. Because Ghostwalker has proven his honor before, Goyakla replied firmly, and because he could have simply avoided this fight entirely. No one forced him to risk his life for our people. The war leader made his decision quickly. Show us these ambush positions. If you speak truth, we will deal with Blackwood's men. If you lie... He let the threat hang in the air unfinished. Sam led the hunting party around the main trail, using the creek bed and animal paths to approach the ambush site from an unexpected direction. When they were in position, Goyakla studied Blackwood's dispositions with the eye of an experienced military commander. 12 men, as you said, but they expect us to ride into their trap like sheep. Instead, we will show them how Apache warriors fight when they choose the ground. The plan Goyakla devised was brilliant in its simplicity. Half the hunting party would circle around to attack Blackwood's men from behind, while the other half would approach from the original trail as if unsuspecting. When the ambushers revealed themselves to spring their trap, they would find themselves caught between 2 forces. Sam found himself assigned to Goyakla's assault group, a mark of trust that wasn't lost on him. As they moved into position, the Apache war leader spoke quietly. After today, there will be war between your people and mine. This conspiracy reaches too high in your government for peaceful solutions. Are you prepared for that reality? Sam considered the question as they crept through the underbrush. If that's what it takes to stop men like Blackwood, then yes. Some fights are worth having. The attack began at sunset, when the golden light would blind Blackwood's men while giving the Apache clear vision. Goyakla's warriors moved like shadows, striking the ambush positions with deadly precision. Sam found himself face to face with Sheriff Morton, who was fumbling for his gun with his good arm. You should have minded your own business, Crawford. Morton snarled. This became my business when you decided to lynch innocent women, Sam replied, drawing faster than the wounded sheriff could react. Morton fell with Sam's bullet in his heart. The battle was over in minutes. Blackwood's men had been prepared for a massacre, not a fight against skilled Apache warriors who knew the terrain and held tactical advantage. When the shooting stopped, only 3 of the gunmen were still alive, and they were in no condition to resist. As the Apache secured their prisoners, Sam noticed one familiar face among the survivors, the man with the gold watch chain who had been at the lynching site. Edward Blackwood himself had come to personally witness the destruction of the Apache hunting party. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, Sam announced, knowing the words were largely symbolic. Territorial law meant little in Apache country, and Blackwood would face tribal justice for his crimes. Blackwood looked up at Sam with hatred and disbelief. "You've destroyed everything. Do you have any idea how much money you've cost me? How many powerful men you've made enemies?" "I've got a pretty good idea," Sam replied. "That's why this fight isn't over yet." Goyakla approached, holding documents he had taken from Blackwood's saddlebags. "These papers show the full scope of the conspiracy. Names of territorial officials, railroad contracts, mining claims, everything we need to prove the truth." Sam studied the documents in the fading light. The conspiracy was even larger than he had imagined, reaching into the offices of territorial judges, land commissioners, and even federal appointees. Exposing it would require more than just surviving today's battle. It would mean taking on the entire power structure of the Arizona Territory. "What happens now?" Sam asked. Goyakla looked toward the mountains where the Apache village lay hidden. "Now we prepare for war. But first we make sure these men face justice for what they tried to do." As darkness fell over the battlefield, Sam realized that his decision to save 3 Apache women from a desert lynching had led him into something much larger than he had ever imagined. The fight for justice was just beginning, but for the first time in years, Sam Crawford felt like he was on the right side of history. The lone desert wanderer had found his purpose at last,